And our first guest on this particular segment is Diana Emerson with TSHA. And what is that?
Well, TSHA was founded in 1969 as Tulsa Speech and Hearing Association, but since that time we've kind of outgrown the name and everybody knows us as TSHA, so that's our legal name
So
now.
that's what you go with.
That is what we go with.
How big a problem is hearing loss?
Hearing loss is, we've been saying for years, 1 in every 10 people of any age, but I suspect it's closer to 1 in 8 now because the baby boom has just hit that age where hearing loss sets in. So the statistics are even higher than what they were. And then you add to that something we're very concerned about, which is noise damage for younger people, because children are growing up these days exposed to noise, and teenagers have iPods in their ears just constantly. So sadly, I feel great job security.
That's horrible.
It's horrible.
I recall reading an article not too long ago in Science Digest where they were talking about hearing problems for young folk who do, as you said, they were in the iBuds, but they've got everything cranked up so loud that several doctors now are recommending some kind of buffer on the upper and lower registers to facilitate some sort of wall to keep them, from hurting their ears. Is that the only solution?
Well, I know that some of the devices allow you to set kind of a maximum loudness level. If they don't, I recommend to parents you might want to mark on the device where the maximum volume is that you'd like to see it set at and have them not go past that. Because with noise exposure, it's not only the loudness, but it's the frequency and the duration. So if you have somebody wearing those earbuds hours every day, then you're going to get a buildup of noise damage over time. I remember years ago, I went out and helped do some hearing screenings out in the public, and I screened this one kid who was about 15 years old, and he was hearing fine, and then he kind of dropped off in the higher frequencies, which is something we often see as people get older. But he was 15, so I thought, did I do something wrong? And I asked the audiologist with me, and she checked it over, and she said it was the beginnings of a noise-induced hearing loss at 15. By the time that kid is 50 or 70, what is he going to be dealing with? So that's something we need to encourage people to look ahead to.
In our industry, there are certain givens. You cannot, for example, be an audio engineer if you're deaf. It just won't work. And yet, one of the handles that's common, if someone is an audio engineer and they are good beyond the equipment they use, they will say, that person got great ears. Not meaning what you see, it's
Right.
the way they hear, because they can bring a balance in that some people it just misses them altogether.
Right.
However, having said that, I've also heard that there are a lot of folk with great ears out there who, over time, don't recognize when they're starting to lose the highs. They don't lose the lows, but they lose the highs.
It's very common for all of us as we get older, and a little bit of hearing loss may set in because we just give our ears a lot of wear and tear in the noisy urban life most of us live in these days. So as hearing loss tends to set in, it's such a gradual thing that it's easy for people to say, why, you mumble, I don't have a hearing problem. And sometimes that's true. Some people do mumble. So it is a very difficult thing to recognize when is that moment that you have to accept it's you and your ears. In fact, I've heard there's an average of 5 to 7 years from the time a person begins to have a hearing loss until they accept that they do. And then what we see is that technology like hearing aids are so expensive that it tends quite often to be another 10, 15 years before somebody actually does something about the loss. So when they do go and get fitted for some type of hearing aid, if that's recommended, they often really struggle to adjust because it's been 10, 15, 20 years since they heard the traffic noise or the air conditioning run or whatever it might be.
You brought some gadgets with you. What are we looking at here?
I sure did. We are looking at, the wonderful thing is that if you have to have a hearing loss, now is the best time ever because technology out there is phenomenal. Not only is hearing aid technology better than it has ever been. I like to say if we'd have been doing this interview 100 years ago, we'd be sitting here with our ear trumpets, but instead there's tiny, tiny hearing aid technology out there these days. But I also think that a lot of people just assume that if you have a hearing loss, a hearing aid is the only answer, and that's kind of the end of the story. And I do want to make clear that I work for a nonprofit United Way agency. We serve people with hearing loss of all amounts and all ages, from birth to death, and from signing deaf people all the way up to...
You're sitting here signing me, aren't you?
I am. It's kind of a habit. And all the way up to your grandmother who loses hearing later in life. So I don't want people to feel like we don't sell anything, we don't fit hearing aids, so we have no agenda here. But there is a lot of technology available beyond just the hearing aid that can really help people to be more independent in their homes. There are things in the last 8 to 10 years, perhaps, captioned telephones have come along. And it used to be that when people's hearing got so bad that even their amplified phone, they'd be cranking up the volume and they still couldn't hear. There just wasn't a good answer for that a few years back. But now you have these captioned telephones where you can talk, you can try to hear the other person, but if you're missing it, the words will just print along that screen, just as captions print on the bottom of your television screen these days. And then you have things like alarm clocks that have a bed shaker. So if you are concerned about sleeping through the sound alarm, this thing will shake you awake in the morning, and you can plug in a lamp and it will flash as well.
I got to ask, are there gadgets for the kitchen as well?
Not as much, but there are some timers that you can clip on and wear that have different frequencies or that will flash a little light. So there's just a whole lot available. And the wonderful news is that people with hearing loss can apply for many of these items through the state of Oklahoma and receive them at low cost or no cost depending on their income level.
I didn't know that.
So help is out there. Almost no one is aware of that, and that's paid for by a tax on our landline telephone bills.
That is a good piece of information to know. When do people, by the time they start to recognize they've got a problem, the damage is pretty well permanent, isn't it?
Well, I always recommend that people treat a hearing loss the same way they would treat an elbow that starts to bother them. Obviously, you take your elbow to the elbow doctor, and if your ears aren't functioning like they used to, you should take your ears to the ear doctor. But I think many people just assume, oh, it's that time in life, and I've got to go get a hearing aid, and they just go where they've seen a commercial. But you want to start with that ear doctor and make sure, is there anything medically going on that you can improve? And let's take care of that. And then if there's still loss there, is a hearing aid an option for you? And you'll be advised of that by that professional.
So use a pro.
Use a pro.
You got a couple of books here.
I sure do. As I mentioned, we work with both the signing deaf population as well as those who have hearing loss later in life. For older individuals, we have the devices, we have a support group, different things like that. For younger people who lose hearing and need an alternative way to communicate, there's sign language, and we can teach that to people who are losing hearing perhaps once they're a little bit grown, but they need another form of communication. And we also offer just general public classes 3 times a year, spring, summer, and fall. Non-credit, no grade, low stress, so that people who have an interest in sign language can come out and kind of just stick a toe in the water and see if it's something that they like.
You know, it's intriguing because how the brain adapts. I'm watching you sign as you speak, and you're signing what you're saying. Then you turn around and let's say you have to sign for this person over here. Is there a slowdown in the rhythm?
There are different ways that I would sign. Right now I'm signing English word order, basically, because I'm speaking in English word order, and I can't sign in American Sign Language or ASL word order and speak English at the same time. Not very well. But for ASL, it's a much more visual way of putting together the signs. So for example, if I was talking about I drove to work in my car, that was signing English, and it's not very visually picturesque. But if I were to say that in ASL, it might be something like,
So you'd have to get more.
like I got
yeah.
into the car and rode along up and down hills, a little bumpy road, and arrived at work. It's much more visual, and it creates a picture, which is what makes it so accessible
Okay.
for children with hearing loss.
Somebody wants to check further on the services you offer. Who do they call? Just
They can call me. I'm the information person, and my name again, Diana Emerson, at 918-832-TSHA or 832-8742.
what? I'm sorry.
I get that a lot.
I had to do that. All right. Hey, thanks for coming in, Kate.
Thank you for having
Appreciate
me.
you. Still to come, you will remember him as soon as you see him from his great work on television. Now he's moving in a new direction. We'll learn more right after this.